unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome. It's Monday. No, it definitely is Monday. Welcome to the show. Let me check the calendar. It is Monday. It's Monday, May the 19th. How does time work? We got a great lineup for you tonight. Just in time for the new Pope's, is it an inauguration? Swearing in? Coronation? Just in time for the new Pope to be Pope. It's definitely that. We will go through various papal conspiracies over the last 1,000+ years. That on a little segment where we analyze conspiratorial thinking called Conspiracy Corner in about 10 minutes' time. Some of them, like a secret Vatican archive, are pretty out there and amazing. Then, what do bacon and stinky stuff that the body makes have in common? Turns out they both disgust us equally when we're vegetarians. Which is to say, disgust and distaste are two totally different things. Like, did you know Parmesan cheese and vomit have the same smell compounds? But one is delicious, the other, not so much. We'll take a look at why humans have this weird quirk. That later in the hour. It's going to be a great lineup. We got someone special to go over the news of the day with us just after the breathy lady's voice.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This is The Last Show. I'm David Cooper. Our foreign correspondent from London, England, Tony 5, joins us for Foreign Corresponding. Tony, welcome.
Good day, David. Good day, worldwide listeners. He who is here, David. How are you?
He who is here. I am fine. We're just saying words for no reason.
David, isn't that what everybody does? Saying words for no reason. Isn't that the premise of this show? Wasn't that the subtitle of this show you pitched to Spotify, David?
Yeah, you're right.
Fair enough. David, whilst we're on the subject of this show, our wonderful producer, Danny, we were talking about me not being here for a while, right? And how the show was going. And, I felt slightly insecure. I wasn't involved, right? And I thought, do you know what? What if he does this without me? What if he leaves me? What if Abbott left without Costello?
Costello? Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
You mean like we were doing the show for a few months without you is what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And I didn't come back. And I thought, well, I'll never come back. And he finds somebody else. It's that hard. You want the person to do well, but you don't want it to do well. So she sent me a message from one of your biggest fans. Someone texted Danny on the show, and she forwarded it to me just to give me an idea of what the people were thinking, right, when you were first broadcast, right? Mm-hmm. So this is what she said. March 24th, by the way. So I'm definitely not on the show. So this doesn't reflect me being on the show, just to double check, okay? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the garbage continues. What the hell is this? And last Friday, they were talking about you people are brain dead. You have now lost me as you're not worth tuning into.
Yeah, I mean, these are accolades. You can't pay for that kind of review.
Right. Message 2, because she called back. So she obviously did listen again. It outraged her again, and then she texted back, which is incredible, right?
This is not a gruntled listener. This is a disgruntled listener.
Correct. This is not gruntled at all. There's no gruntling involved in this. I tuned in hoping, she spelled it as hopping, someone came to their senses. Brain dead idiots are in charge. Are you proud that I listened to your garbage for 2 to 3 minutes?
I mean, that's a pretty good listener retention right there. Better than I thought.
Okay, now then David, she listened again. Now she became personal, my friend.
See, people like this love to hate the show. They're still listening.
This is April, so this is the next month, right?
So she's been listening for months. She's my best fan.
Right, remember, I'm not on the show yet. Yeah, it's nothing to do with me, people.
No, you made that clear.
This is not reflective of my interaction and content.
You made that clear.
Cool. Give me a break. Your so-called entertainment should be on at 2 or 3 a.m. I tried to listen to your garbage, but it's not worth my time. Have you named your new show Garbage With? I have no idea who the idiot host is. I have never heard so much on the radio.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, I think that was my mum.
Yeah, that was your mom, Dixie. All right, let's move on. Those are some serious accolades we got. We've got an old idea, but a new name. It's GLUN, Global Local Unnewsworthy News with Tony 5. Tony 5 finds all the global, local, unnewsworthy
news.
I'm confused.
Well, one of the things is that this is relatively it happened last month, so this is we're looking at April 2025. It's fantastic. Now, I'm an amateur magician, as maybe everybody knows. I love my magic. I love tricks. Magic Circle, one of the greatest, oldest institutions of magic. Very similar to your Magic Castle, I think, is in Vegas. Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you're not a nerd for magic. So
what's magic? What's this? Just a bunch of dudes doing tricks. Who cares?
Listen, in 1991, the Magic Circle did not admit women. Do you know that, David?
Wow. This is like the Pope. This is the papal. Yeah.
This is like the conclave, my friend. And there was a female magician called Sophie Lloyd. Fantastic magician. She pretended to be a teenage boy called Raymond. Fake wig, jaw brace, gloves, everything. She hid herself, hid her, like the fact that she didn't have an Adam's apple, feminine hands, and so forth. You have to do a magic trick to enter the Magic Circle. She did. She entered it, David, right, in 1991. When she realized that she couldn't carry on, they asked her to do some tricks, and her voice dropped, apparently. They kicked her out. Huge scandal amongst the magic people. David Blaine, outraged. David Copperfield, outraged.
Were they mad that they wouldn't admit the woman, or mad that she cheated?
Mad that she tricked them. She fooled them, which is weird because they do tricks for a living, right?
That's true, and they kind of deserved it. Like, this is not a competition that needs women barred. Not that any competition was or is, but especially this one.
I think it was just a stuffy old men's club, and it's kind of like, they get in there, do magic tricks and probably get drunk and talk about like women in a derogative way.
Yeah.
30 years later, which is this year.
Apology?
They apologized. They issued an apology, and they basically brought her back in and had a full apology for her, said it shouldn't have been done at the time, and she's like an honored member now, which I thought was amazing and like weird news, right? Because it's about a woman entering a club ultimately, but it's, it was world grabbing news, my friend.
On the TV show Arrested Development, they have, I think it's fictional, they call it the Magician's Guild, and you can get kicked out for revealing tricks. And one of the characters, this is like what they're parodying on that show?
Correct. So the Magician's Guild on Arrested Development is taken after the Magic Circle, which is the oldest magic club or magic fraternity. That's the word I'm trying to get in the world. So being a fraternity, obviously, was only frats in there.
Yeah, they only allow frats.
Yeah, so that was it. So I just thought it was amazing, and then she got her own back, and obviously, and was admitted, and there's a big ceremony and a big like major apology for why they left her. But it's great, and yeah, maybe they'll let dogs in next.
Where is the club?
In central London near King's Cross, so not too far. I've been there. It's a beautiful place. It's amazing. But
you've gone in. They've let you in as an amateur.
Yeah, they're going to let black people in 2 years' time.
Oh, that's exciting. Will you be the first member? Yeah. You're killing me, man. You're killing me. Would you want to join, or do you need to be like, a David Copperfield type?
Seriously, I would love to join. I do love magic. I love sleight of hand. I've seen people there. It's a very intimate smoke. All of the greatest magicians in the world have been there and have honed their act there. So it'll be like you being in a radio store.
Yeah, like a Radio Shack or something.
Yeah, Walmart, Radio Shack, Target. Yeah, basically that.
Yeah, I could just go and see where they sell radios.
There you go, my friend. Don't say I'm never there for the advice.
Tony, what a pleasure it was having you. Well, you're coming back on the show in later next hour to do something special and probably ridiculous.
I can't wait, my friend. I cannot wait. An hour can't go fast enough. It's going to feel like 2.
All right, Tony will be in the wings and then come back next hour. Coming up after the break, papal conspiracies. We'll take a look at some of the wildest, most out there conspiracies surrounding the Vatican over the last 1,000 years. Because what better time than now? That'll include one conspiracy that alleges that the church stole 300 years from all of us.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Sadly, the Pope has passed. Long live the new Pope, as it is said. It's Conspiracy Corner. We are joined by Dr. Lee Kuhnle, a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic and co-host of the Uncover Up podcast, to discuss papal conspiracies throughout time. I feel like now would be a good time to discuss this. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David. Yeah, I thought that given that there has been a new pope elected, I thought we'd take a look at some historical conspiracies related to the Pope and the Vatican. And when I started doing work on it, I was so surprised at how many. There were just so many conspiracies. So I'm coming with, I think, some of the top fun ones, but there are so many more on top of it.
I feel like a lot of intrigue around the Pope came out when everyone read that accurate documentary, The Da Vinci Code, and they started to realize the history of it all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we'll totally get to that because that is based to some extent on the Vatican archives. And there are some conspiracies about that, some really interesting ones, and one, in fact, which got solved.
All right. Well, let's start with the year 1000. I was a little bit younger in those days, possibly not born. I'm not great at math. Tell me about phantom time that the Catholic Church is alleged to have, created?
Yeah, invented a whole epoch of history that maybe didn't ever exist. So this is a fun conspiracy that is one of these that I think emerges in a lot of different guises, like, how do we actually know it's Thursday today or whatever day it might be? It isn't even Thursday, it's Monday today. But how do we know? It's one of those. And so the argument is that the calendar is actually 297 years ahead of where it should be if we had been counting the days and years since the historical Jesus walked the earth. And the idea is that there were two guys in the early Middle Ages, Pope Sylvester II and Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, who together connived to create 297 years of fake history so that they would be ruling in the year 1000. And 1000 is the millennium, and this is an important number in Christian theology, especially those people who are sort of counting the days till the second coming. The 1,000 years since the historical Jesus might be just the time when he comes back. And so they apparently wanted to rule during this period because it would seem very auspicious and it would give them a lot of credit. And so Pope Sylvester dies in the year 1003, but by this new calculation, he actually died in the year 706 because he and his buddy just invented 300 years of history so that they could be ruling at the millennium. And they the theorist who comes up with this is a guy named Herbert Illig, and he points to a bunch of data. So, for example, there aren't really any artifacts from this period of time, and there's way too many Roman ruins lying about. He points to things like that to suggest that maybe these guys actually just made it all up.
This is a relatively new conspiracy. It was first asserted, in the 1990s?
Exactly,
this is not a widely held belief for many years.
No.
And let's go through some of these claims. I don't know, he just says, there isn't enough artifacts, that therefore it's evidence. To me, that's not really compelling evidence. It's just evidence that there aren't that many artifacts from that era, which I don't even think is true.
Yeah, no, look, that the evidence here is not very strong. And I totally agree with you. One of the things that I think is really interesting in a conspiracy like this is sometimes it presents itself as, this is one of those that is maybe not a plausible idea, but it's going to be really hard to debunk, but actually turns out to be really straightforward to debunk, because a lot of times what these conspiracies don't take into account is that there are other histories. So we can compare
wait.
history.
Western liberal democracies, there's other histories around the world that didn't happen in Europe and the United States and Canada?
Exactly. So what you could do then is you can look at, say, the Chinese historical record, the Indian historical record, and things will be matching up. You can say, well, this ruler in China was ruling at the same time as this ruler in the Holy Roman Empire or whatever. And those histories keep matching up. And so do the astronomical records and things like that. So the evidence isn't awesome for this conspiracy and is actually quite easy to debunk. But I thought it was a fun one because it does suggest that there are actually maybe straightforward ways of getting at things that seem on the face of it kind of tricky.
Yeah, one thing that is you're able to kind of match ancient calendars and ancient historical records are comets.
Yeah.
And the appearance of, Halley's Comet?
Exactly.
Like if Chinese history and Indian history and all these other societies back then, if their records date these comets, then you know that things happened in years. It's very hard to steal a year when there's periodic astronomical phenomenon.
And that's exactly how we can debunk a conspiracy like this. And the Chinese especially were like super finicky about their astronomical records. So it's really good. It goes back for ages and we can keep counter-dating things with them.
Interesting. Let's go more modern now. This one's a conspiracy from the 1990s.
80s, actually.
That's what I said. You said 90s. I said 80s. Why did you say 90s? God's banker. Tell me about him.
Well, just with the Vatican Bank, there's a bunch of conspiracies and they go back quite far, but this one is pretty shocking when you learn about it. So in June 1982, a man named Roberto Calvi, who is also known as God's banker, he is found murdered under a bridge in London, England.
Wow.
And he is, or was at that time, the head of Banco Ambrosiano. And the Vatican Bank owned a lot of shares in that bank. And so he's the head of this bank. And it is caught up in the 70s and early 80s in clearly illegal dealings. It starts really in 78 when the Bank of Italy showed that the Banco Ambrosiano had been illegally exporting billions of lira out of the country. And so Calvi is the head of the bank at the time that this is happening. And this bank and the Vatican Bank are very closely associated. And so Calvi, this isn't speculation, Calvi is actually tried and he's found guilty. And in 1981, he's sentenced to 4 years in prison, except he's out on bail. And before his death, he even writes a letter to John Paul II saying that this bank is like in really big trouble. And then there's another investigation that uncovers a whole bunch of debt that nobody had known about, like basically $1 billion of undisclosed debt.
Wow.
And at that point, the bank folds. And then not even a month later, this man is hanged under a bridge in England. And there are 2 coroner reports that investigate this, trying to determine if it was a suicide or if it was murder. And they both find that it was murder. Now, nobody has been arrested and sentenced for this. And so you can imagine, of course, who all the suspects are. And it ranges from actually officials in the Vatican Bank, maybe it was the mob, to the Freemasons, and off we go into the world of speculation.
I mean, it's one of those where the circumstances seem really weird and ripe for conspiracy. It doesn't mean that we know what happened, but this guy was basically working with the Vatican's money.
Yeah, and stealing it.
And then poof, he disappears. This one kind of makes you wonder.
Right? I mean, exactly. And this too is one where you'd have to say, look, I mean, conspiracies are all around us, right? I mean, it's silly to imagine that they all are in the category of the first one where some guy makes up 300 years of time or doesn't because it's easy to show he didn't. Then there's this kind of stuff where you're like, no, this man really was murdered. That much we know. And he did oversee an illegal operation that defrauded the Vatican of potentially billions of dollars. I mean, you know.
We'll be back with Dr. Lee Kuhnle. It's Conspiracy Corner. We're talking papal conspiracies, modern and ancient. When we come back, the purported woman who reigned as Pope for 2 years. Purported.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
It is Conspiracy Corner. We are joined by Dr. Lee Kuhnle. He is a conspiracy theory expert, a professor at Humber Polytechnic, and host of the Uncover Up Conspiracy Podcast. Lee, what a pleasure it is to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here, David.
I don't think the current vice president of the U.S. did anything wrong in this one particular area, but people do find it curious that he visited the Pope, or visat. Is that the right word? Visited. Visat's not a word.
It's definitely visited. I mean, if I'm wrong on that, I got to retire now.
No, I've just been trying to create this word visat, and it hasn't been working because I'm an idiot. So he goes and visits the Pope, and then like days later, he passes. I mean, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah. And what I think is going to happen is that what has started as satire in terms of making a causal connection between those two events is later, in a couple of years, give it 5 or 10 years, is going to have a toehold in the conspiratorial world as a legit conspiracy theory. And this is this kind of trajectory. This is where some of the conspiracies start, is they start as humor, they start as satire, but that origin is forgotten. And then, like we saw with Birds Aren't Real, it's starting where people are actually thinking, oh, this is a conspiracy that people believe, and some believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, something weird happens. It could be a coincidence, which is very likely what happened here. It could be unusual circumstances around a world event that are unexplained. And boom, that's like fertile ground for this stuff. Let's talk papal conspiracies. Pope Joan.
Pope Joan.
She was Pope for 2 years, according to some people.
Yeah, that's right. According to a lot of people, depending on what historical period you ask, the man on the street, the woman on the street, in the 1600s and before, this was considered history. This was not considered mythology. So the idea is that between 855 and 857, there was a woman who had insinuated herself in as Pope. She had dressed up as a man for many years previous. She was a smart woman who had disguised herself as a man, entered the church, rose through the ranks, and then was turned into Pope. And it was apparently the scam was revealed when, during a religious procession, she gave birth.
Oh, wow. That's not, you think if she was, she would maybe avoid religious processions.
Yes, you'd think that. Exactly. And around that time, it's when I started to get my spidey sense up and wonder if this was really a story or not. Most likely, this actually emerged as a work of fiction in the 1200s. And so what's interesting here is your connection with J.D. Vance just in your intro, is maybe this is actually exactly that story, or you see the trajectory of that story where something started as fiction, because we have the chronicles from the 1200s, which recount this as a fictional event. And then that fictional origin is forgotten, and the story, though, remains, and when was taken seriously by people hundreds of years after the story was first created as fiction. And so in the 1400s in Western Europe, people remembered there being a Pope Joan who, as a woman, nonetheless ruled the Catholic Church for 2 years.
It's kind of interesting because, they're not supposed to be.
Yeah, no, they're not allowed.
But the headdress, the ornament, the crown that the Pope wears is called the papal tiara, which I feel like would be very appropriate on a woman, a tiara.
I make no further comment on that.
Were there like any attitudes around acceptance of women as priests with this? Like, would it have been told as a good story, as a historical error? Like, those who believed in it before it was dismissed by scholars, what would they have thought about it?
I think this is generally a really interesting question that you bring up in terms of what did people actually believe. And I think you get as many answers from 1,000 years ago as you do today. You will get really sophisticated approaches to belief where people are like, well, it's an interesting story, or no, actually, this was literally true, or who knows, there might not be enough evidence. I think on the whole, back when this story was being told, it was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, subversive against power. We have exposed sort of the rot in that institution kind of story. It's like the little guy who makes it in and is able to, exist in this world in which he's totally not supposed to be in. I think that's how that story was told. But again, I think you can have lots of different reactions. I'm sure there are people who just took it very naively as like, yeah, that just happened as a piece of history. And maybe others see it as an allegory of how silly the church members are, maybe an anti-clerical story.
I'm here with Dr. Lee Kuhnle discussing papal conspiracies. Let's get to the meaty one, the one that like Da Vinci Code could have been inspired by. The rumors of a secret Vatican archive with documents that would blow your mind and reveal all kinds of crimes and conspiracies and who knows what. Do these archives exist? What is the thinking around this?
Yeah. So the archives totally exist. So the Vatican has archives. They're known as the Vatican Apostolic Archives, and they go back centuries. They might even go back further, like they might go back a millennia. And what's in these archives? We don't exactly know. This is, as you say, exactly where Dan Brown makes his money. In terms of creating the fictions around what could possibly be in the archives. And there are things like suggestions that there is evidence that Jesus maybe married, maybe he had offspring, or maybe in the archives, they actually have the objects or evidence of where to find the Holy Grail, the Shroud of Turin, the Ark of the Covenant, all this kind of stuff.
It's like Indiana Jones, Da Vinci Code, it's all there.
It's all there. It's all there in the archives, and the archives really do exist. And so, of course, it's this place of great speculation, and it's essentially, you can project what you want onto it. And that probably be the end of a story like this, except that sometimes you actually do find something in here that is mind-blowing. And in 2001, an archivist working in these archives found what today is known as the Chinon parchment. And this goes back to 1308. And amazingly, this is a document that had been theorized to exist. People wondered if it existed. People looked for it for literally almost 1,000 years because it's part of a larger conspiracy in terms of what happened to the Knights Templar and the church's complicity in getting that group of knights disbanded, imprisoned, and sometimes executed. And this parchment fully exonerates the Knights Templar from any wrongdoing. And so it cleared up a mystery literally for like almost 1,000 years. What happened to the Knights Templar and what was the church's involvement in it? This document, when it was released, 2001, finally cleared that up and said, actually, the Knights Templar did nothing wrong, and this was a political hack job.
And the Knights Templar were sort of the military forces of the church that got disbanded, 900 years ago?
Yeah, and they got crazy rich, and they also had access to maybe secret knowledge, and maybe they got too powerful, and then they got disbanded, and yeah.
There's always a danger here when the truth reveals some conspiracy. It arms people to believe in conspiracies that aren't true, or arms people's speculation to be peddled as truth. So you always have to be careful. But this one's kind of interesting. I'd love to take a look at those archives.
Yeah, me too. I mean, if only they'd let us in there, it'd be so much fun.
You and I could take a show field trip to the archives. David and Lee, go to the archives.
Yeah, I mean, we'd need some Latin scholar, I think. But yeah, or Google Translate on our phone, one or the two.
The Pope claims to have chosen his name Leo because of AI, because the previous Leo was around during the Industrial Revolution, and he was sort of a pope for a changing society.
Wow.
And so the new pope chose his name because he wants to be a pope for the changing of society as well, because of AI and modern computing and this kind of stuff. Just
Really?
Fun tidbit.
I'm glad it didn't go where I thought this was going to go, where I thought you were saying he asked AI for his Pope name.
No, or he is AI. I mean, that's a conspiracy that people might end up believing. Lee, always a pleasure. Check out Lee's podcast, The Uncover Up. You can look that up wherever podcasts are found. Lee, thank you.
Thanks for having me, David.
Dr. Lee Kuhnle is a political science professor at Humber College. Up next, a big difference between what we find disgusting and what we don't like to eat. And we can trick our brains into not liking stuff. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Quick warning, the following will be educational. All right, just in case it doesn't seem educational, it will be. Diving in. What does delicious and nutritious bacon and not so delicious and definitely not nutritious poop have in common? Well, if you're a vegetarian, maybe more than you think. A study from the University of Exeter looks at disgust and why eating meat can feel to some people as revolting as refuse or even eating human flesh. Our guest today is one of those researchers behind the study that shows that your brain might be the thing more grossed out than your taste buds. Her name is Dr. Elisa Becker. She's a behavior change interventions researcher at the University of Oxford. Elisa, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
What is the difference between distaste and disgust when it comes from food? And why does this distinction matter?
Oh, that's a great question to start off with. So the difference is that they're both, let's start with a similarity. They're both rejection mechanisms, psychological mechanisms that we have to reject food. Distaste is a very simple aversion to bitter or sour tastes. And you can find that in most mammals and some birds and many other animals. So it's evolutionarily very old. Disgust, on the other hand, is probably uniquely human. And it's a rejection mechanism that's based on something much more vague. It's like the idea of what a food is or where it comes from or what has touched it. And it seems to respond, as our study shows, mainly to meat and animal products.
I once read, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the smell compounds that are emitted from Parmesan cheese are the same as those emitted from, it's a little gross, but human vomit. And it's just our brains that pick one and say, oh, this is extremely appetizing. I love Italian cooking. And then one is like, oh my God, get me away from that. That's going to make me sick. When I smell Parmesan cheese, I don't see it. And I think this is the same mechanism, right? Like psychologically, we're set up to find certain things like awful, get it away from me. I'm going to be sick if I see it, eat it, whatever. And the other ones is delicious. Is this the same kind of mechanism we're talking about here?
Yeah, you're even going one step further here. I think that's a really good example. The smell of Parmesan. Yeah, I can kind of relate that does actually smell like vomit a little bit. The things that we find disgusting, we have to learn in our childhood. And equally, we learn that some things are not disgusting, but that differs widely across cultures. So as someone in our culture would say, eating dog meat or cat meat is absolutely vile and disgusting. In other cultures, that's not so. And even going back in time in our own cultures, people would have eaten a lot more variety of meats and been totally fine with it. But now we shun that as disgusting and would probably find that nausea-inducing, just thinking about eating that. So there's a strong cultural element here too, of what we feel, where we feel that disgust and where we suppress that disgust.
And I think vegetarians are like the perfect group to look at this. My ex-wife was a vegetarian, and it wasn't for like ethical reasons. She just like didn't like meat. And when she would try it, she would become violently ill. So anecdotally, I kind of observed what you studied here. You found that vegetarians react to meat the way that omnivores react to like really abhorrent things like human flesh or things like this.
Yes. So what we actually did in the study, what we actually wanted to find out was what vegetarians like your ex-wife feel. How does that feel to be so grossed out by meat? Because I don't feel it. Most people don't feel it. And in particular, we wanted to know whether they feel distaste or disgust? Are they just put off by the taste, or is that actual disgust? And it's really hard to unpick, actually, once you think about it, because most people don't use that distinction in everyday language. Who talks about distaste, right? So you can't just ask people. So what we did instead is we showed people images of foods that they personally found off-putting. We showed them foods like, bacon, beefsteak, roast chicken. I would find it delicious, but most of the vegetarians in our study found it really off-putting. And then we also showed pictures of vegetables that people often find off-putting, beetroot, Brussels sprouts, things like that. And then some really horrible images of human flesh, feces, dog flesh. And we asked them questions that were able to disentangle that feeling and identify whether it was disgust or distaste that they were feeling. And what we found was that all the vegetables were rejected based on distaste, but the meat rejections were much stronger and matched really closely the rejections of human meat, dog meat, feces, but all of those things were classified as disgust.
Do you think there's an evolutionary reason behind this, like these two mechanisms, one finding food disgusting and the other one just gross tasting?
Absolutely. And that's kind of my favorite thing about all of this is to think about why we need disgust and distaste in the first place. So if you think about an omnivore in the wild, so humans are omnivores, and we need to decide what we can eat in the wild, what foods are edible. If you try a plant and it's very bitter, then you have a pretty clear indication that it might be toxic. So plants have this strategy of avoiding to be eaten by being toxic. And when they're toxic, they're also very often bitter because they don't want to wait until you drop dead. They want you to stop eating them now. So that's a very clear signal. Bitter, stay away. Meat, on the other hand, and humans started eating a lot more meat in a certain point in our evolutionary history, started relying on meat a lot more. And the threats to our health that meat poses are very different. Meat isn't toxic. Meat has pathogens and parasites. And these, in turn, are also living organisms that have their own interests at heart, which are not to stay away from it, but they want to be eaten, right? They need to find their next host. So they are undetectable by taste or smell. So distaste isn't really going to help us. And so that's when I think we developed disgust, or we evolved disgust.
Like if someone in a tribe of early humans got sick from a meat, they could convey that to their fellow tribes people, and then they could develop a disgust to it, and that would be the evolutionary advantage? Or
I don't think there would have been so much communication necessary. I think that would probably be too elaborate. I think it's more of an instinctive response to all meat and all other animal products. So if you think about the things that make us really disgusted, it's vomit, it's blood, feces, they're all animal products in a sense, and meat. And I think it's more the other way around, so that we started getting disgusted by all meat and suppressing that disgust, just like with the parmesan, to the few meats that we deemed safe for from cultural background, basically.
Interesting.
And just to exemplify that, think of the animals that we eat in our culture. There's maybe 5 or 6
livestock, mostly, not just any old animal. I'm not eating a pigeon off the street.
That's right. We've domesticated a handful. We've labeled them as safe, or culturally they're safe. But there's a whole lot more animals out there that we could be eating, that we don't eat, that we automatically find disgusting. In other cultures, they are eaten. If you think that same thought about a plant from a completely different continent, a plant that you've never heard of, and somebody offers it to you as food and says it's perfectly safe, you can eat it, it's not disgusting, is it? You might not be willing to try it if you're a little bit of a picky eater, maybe, but you're not going to find that disgusting.
But it's the taste. It's not this mental kind of this block. Any future directions for the study and research here?
Yes, I think the next really interesting thing is what about the plant-based meat alternatives that are now really widely available on the market? So these are vegetables, in a sense, that are trying to look and smell and taste like meat. So would we feel disgust towards these or distaste? And I really don't have the answer because I haven't looked into that yet.
Elisa, thanks for talking to me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Elisa Becker is a behavior change interventions researcher at the University of Oxford. Up next, a study that'll arm us to give our mothers a hard time. Turns out whether your mom is warm or not can predict key personality traits later in life. Details in a few moments. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
How your mother talked to you as a kid might shape who you are today. Not just your feelings, but your whole personality. Our guest psychology lecturer, Dr. Jasmin Wertz from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, led a study that found that a warm, affectionate mom could make you a more open, conscientious, and kind person, even if you're an identical twin. Let's find out how this works and find out the reason why I'm none of those things. Jasmin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
At the heart of your study, this concept of maternal warmth, how do you define it? How do you measure something that to me seems kind of intangible? Is this just hugs? Is it bedtime stories? Or is it something more subtle than that?
Yeah, so in our study, we actually had mothers talk about each of her twins for 5 minutes. We analyzed the tone of voice and the things she said when she was talking about her twins. And for example, some mothers said about the twins something like, oh, she's a delight, she's my ray of sunshine, she's wonderful. And about another twin, they might have said something like, oh, I don't like her. So in an extreme example, it would have been something, I don't like her. So really expressing both in the words that she uses as well as in the tone of voice that there's less warmth and less affection for the child. And, you know, it might strike you as quite an indirect measure because the mother is talking about her children. But we have found in our research that's quite highly correlated with the way that she behaves when she actually interacts with the children as well. So it seems to be quite a good measure getting at the sorts of affection that mothers show toward their children.
There's an old saying about parenting. I don't know how good it is, but it's you should love your children equally, but you don't have to like them all equally.
I have 2 children, and yes, I think that.
So wait, you researched this area, and yet you felt.
I hope that my children will not listen to this. No, but I think it is the case that, and that might be surprising for some that even if you have identical twins, who are obviously very similar in many ways. There is, among many of these parents, we could see that there were slight differences in the extent of warmth and affection that the mother provided to each of her children.
So you start to understand the different ways in which a mother can treat their children. How do you analyze what the personality traits are of the children themselves?
Yes, so the affectionate parenting was assessed when the children were 5 and 10 years old. And because this is a longitudinal study, so it follows the families up over time, we went to the twins again when they were 18 years old. And we had research workers who came into the families' homes and they rated these twins. It's called the Big 5 personality traits. So these are 5 personality traits that seem to be very good at describing people across cultures, across ages. You already mentioned some of them. So open-mindedness, agreeableness, conscientiousness. We also have neuroticism and extroversion. So we had the research workers rate the twins. And then we looked at whether parenting was linked with the personality traits of the twins at that age.
And so what were some of the things you found? That the ones that received more maternal affection were more open, more conscientious, more agreeable. I'm none of those things, and I'm looking at you, Mom, if you're listening. But please, what were the things that you found?
Yes, so that's exactly right. So we found that the twins who had, so even within a family, We found that the identical twin who had received more affectionate parenting was more open-minded, and that's something we think of as curiosity, creativity, more agreeable, so that's being kind and cooperative with others, and more conscientious, so more diligent and planful. Where we didn't find differences was in the extent of extroversion and neuroticism as well. So we did not find these effects for all the personality traits, but for the three first ones I mentioned, we did find a difference.
I'm highly neurotic. I think I have generalized anxiety disorder. I bite my nails. Are you saying I cannot blame my mom, even if she was, in fact, not maternally warm?
Right, yes.
So it's very interesting because we did find that these effects, so at the within twin level, so when you compare twins to each other, that's where we didn't see that association or that link anymore. And that seems to suggest that there's a role of genetic influences for neuroticism as well as extroversion. So you can blame your genes. You can indirectly still blame your parents because they gave you your genes, but the parenting does not seem to be involved here, at least in our study.
So small differences in how a parent treats childs or identical twins can lead to these different personalities. Does this reshape how we think of parenting, or maybe fairness when it comes to parenting? Are there takeaways or recommendations? Like, I'm kind of surprised that even amongst twins, this small thing can, well, I guess maternal warmth is not necessarily small, but I'm surprised that it can result in different personalities.
Yeah, so the key takeaway that we think is important from our findings is that, even those small differences can have an impact. And therefore, we should try and support parents in being affectionate with their children. And there are some more direct ways. For example, there are parenting programs available that can support parents. For example, if they struggle with disciplining their children effectively, doing that maybe in a more affectionate way, and building positive and strong relationships with their children. But there are also many indirect ways. So, for example, supporting families financially so that parents can focus on parenting and children rather than having to worry about finances. It's also the case that if mental health care and treatment is available for parents, then that can support parents because, again, then they don't have to worry about or feel stressed or be depressed, but can focus on their parenting. So there are various ways in which we can support parents and therefore children.
You focused on mothers. Do you have any idea about fathers, about paternal affection? Does it have the same impact? Are dads off the hook on this one? Tell me about that.
So we would have loved to have looked at that in our study, but unfortunately we didn't have that data from the fathers. It does seem to be the case that for fathers, we see similar results in previous research. So although we didn't look at this in this particular study, there is previous research suggesting that paternal affection is just as important. So same ideas here apply about supporting fathers as well as mothers.
Was there a particular result or interpretation of your data that made you kind of go, wow, I wasn't expecting that?
Yeah, so we were a bit surprised to not see these findings for extroversion and neuroticism in particular, because I think generally people assume that affectionate parenting would be linked with neuroticism. And so, as I said, in our study, we found that there was more of an effect of genetic influences there than for parenting. So, yeah.
There's this idea, I've heard it, that personality is kind of fixed by adulthood, that who you are, who you seem to be is kind of set once you become a young adult. Is there room for change there?
Yes, absolutely. So we didn't look at personality change in our study. However, there is a lot of research suggesting that you can change your personality even as an adult. There is work, for example, on therapy making a difference to people's personality, particularly with neuroticism, which is interesting because obviously in our study we didn't see that link with parenting, but there do seem to be interventions that help people become less neurotic. Example. So you mentioned your neuroticism. So
yeah, no, I used to go to therapy twice a week. I go to talk therapy once a week now. I've been going for years. I'd like to think that it did help me change a bit and help me manage some of these things.
Right. Yeah. And that would be very consistent with what research has shown as well.
Yeah. So if the mother is not very warm, at least the adult child, once they grow up, can put a therapist's kids through college by paying for their therapy fees. Well, thanks for going over your study with me. This was a great chat. Dr. Jasmin Wertz is a psychology lecturer at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Jasmin, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
All right, listener, if you've got advice for your tomorrow self, some sage-like wisdom to share with your future, you can always call us at 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-505-6644. If we don't pick up, leave a voicemail with your advice for yourself. And we'll have you back on the show in the future to check in with yourself. And I explain all this, A, so you'll call, but B, because that's what we're going to do up next. We've got a listener of the program, our foreign correspondent, Tony 5, and advice for our future selves. That's right. The time machine exists. Sort of. Chaos up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Advice for your tomorrow self from yesterday, or maybe from today for tomorrow. If you're confused, you're not alone. This is what happens on the last show with David Cooper and Tony 5.
Tony 5 is our foreign correspondent from London, England. Tony, we got something special today.
I'm waiting. Do you know when they say bated breath? But what does that mean? Because I have bated breath.
It sounds inappropriate, but I know that it's not.
Yeah.
Because I've heard the Queen say it, probably.
Okay, fair enough.
We have a caller of the show who's been incessantly calling, leaving voicemails. He left some advice. I'm not even sure it's advice for his yesterday's self to be played today. So we're going to bring him on the show, Tony.
Is it Andrew Tate?
No, it's not.
Okay. Carry on.
It is a gentleman by the name of Mike from Windsor. He's waiting on the line. He's from Windsor, Ontario, Canada.
He's insane. He's clinically insane.
I think I already regret the next 10 minutes, but he's a caller. He's called the show. He's got advice for himself to be played today, I think, and we're going to bring him on right now.
Hello.
Hello, Mike in Windsor. It's David Cooper and Tony 5.
Mike, Michael, Mickey D, Mike.
Oh,
The legend returns, my friend.
it's nice to hear you again, my number one fan.
My God, Mike.
And I'm your number one fan.
Mike, when I hear your voice, my vulva quivers.
Your vulva? Oh,
It does, yeah. I traded up from a Kia.
yeah. We have both.
Don't bring the show down, Mike. Come on. This is a great show. Broadcast all over the Eastern Board.
Well, you know what? I thought I was bringing it up. The show's on an erection right now.
Oh, my God.
No, don't be silly, Mike. It's always on the gutter, and we can only go lower.
So, anyway.
Mike, take your inhaler. So,
Mike, you're here for a specific reason, you psychopath.
Mike, are you okay?
I've been called worse.
Mike, please stay off the kids. This is why you don't do drugs.
All right, Mike, it's advice from your yesterday's self for tomorrow. Here is some advice that you recorded for yourself today. I'm going to play it for you, and then we're going to find out whether you followed your advice. Okay, Mike?
Are you dead? Mike? Was someone called 911?
What? Oh.
There he is.
Oh, I thought you were playing. I thought you were playing the clip.
No. Mike, here's a clip of you. You're going to hear yourself. It won't be you right now. It'll be you from the past.
Playing today. Mike, the clue that it'll be playing is that you'll hear your voice, okay?
Okay, I thought we were in the DeLorean. I don't know what's going on.
No, Mike, be quiet. This is Mike from yesterday.
Well, to future Mike, to past Mike, I always missed the opportunity when I was dating who would become my future wife. There were women, some women that came out of the woodwork and expressed interest, and I did not, take opportunity on that, and so I kind of regret that. And The other thing I can think of is education. I wish I would have got more. I mean, I do have 2 years of college, but you can never have enough education. So that's it.
Fantastic. Mike, I'm going to address both your queries. Now, I'm going to do number 2 first. College education for 2 years. We're never going to berate anybody for not going or going to university. As you well know, universities don't exist. I believe it's a conspiracy. Number 1, Mike, lost love. I have felt lost love. We all know that it's always the one that got away, right, Mike? Tell me about the one that got away.
Oh, God. Oh, man. I'll tell you. There was a time...
She wasn't part of your family, was she?
Well, no.
Good. Carry on.
Okay, I was dating my wife at the time. I was at a bar, and I was sitting with a woman who was recently divorced, and she looked like Shania Twain.
You dirty dog, Mike. Is she the one that sings the Titanic song?
Yeah. And she no, I'm not going to be able to complete this. And anyway, she unzipped.
What did she unzip? Woo! Content warning.
Her pants and showed me her panties in the bar.
What? Oh man, you should have blew up your whole life, Mike. Dun, 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 dun,
you should have got divorced and remarried at the bar.
Well, and there was another time in the same club where I was sitting with 4 or 5 other people. One of them was my friend at the time.
Did she look like Shania Twain?
No. This one was a blonde, and she was sitting next to me, and her boyfriend was on the other side of her. And the thing was, she kept rubbing my leg.
Woo! Dun, 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 dun.
Ménage à trois.
And so I moved over, but I was, there was a half wall there at the end of the booth. So I moved over as far as I could. And guess what? She moved with me.
Man, I feel like a woman.
Right against me. I'm like,
Mike, you are a heartbreaker.
The thing is, like, psychologically, when I was single and I would go out with some friends to the bar, we would just, we're clubbing.
Oh, yeah, Mike?
Yeah, we would just go and watch girls dancing and stuff like that.
Dun, 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 dun. Keep going.
Yeah. We would never.
I mean, David, we need to go clubbing with Mike. This guy is a dog, and I'm spelling that with a W.
The thing is, we would never have the liquid courage to approach anybody. But when I started dating who would become my future wife, the women came out of the woodwork.
Wow.
So
they knew. They could smell it on you.
I'm thinking the psychological thing here is that if a guy is by himself, there's a reason why he's by himself. Now, if a guy is with a woman on his arm, he's something. He's something to look after.
He is.
I mean, Mike, you are an educated Lothario, Mike. You've analyzed yourself. You've got yourself a reason, and you've not given David or I a chance to talk on David's show.
Yeah, it's fine. It's the Mike Show. More importantly, that was not advice for your tomorrow self. It was your regrets from your 25-year-old self.
No, what are you talking about, David? That was boasting.
Well,
Mike has just been a player.
My advice to my future self is I would sow more oats. Let's put it that way.
But that's your past self. You're old now. You're married. You have kids. You can't go back in time and go back to university and pick up the women that you met before you met your wife. You're already with your wife. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
You're missing the point of the segment. You're only yesterday.
Marty.
You can't go back to Shania Twain, which was at least 10 years ago. This is yesterday.
Marty, my kids. The DeLorean.
Shania Twain is dead, Mike. Move on.
Let's all sing it together now. I'm the kind of gal.
Man, I feel like a woman.
We need plutonium.
Oh, we've lost Mike.
I regret everything about the last 10 minutes. Mike in Windsor, everybody. Mike, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to talk to you guys again. And unfortunately, I couldn't do my special opening.
Well, you've got 10 seconds, Mike. Why don't you say your special goodbyes? Because whether you're on the show again is really up for grabs at this point.
May the farce be with you.
That was Yoda or Toda. I can't with you, Mike.
That's Toda.
Mike, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oh my God, there he goes, foreign correspondent Tony 5. Up next, doesn't matter what you do on your phone, if you're laying in bed and scrolling, you risk insomnia according to science. Don't believe me? More on this after the break. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
The Last Show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
We're sacrificing sleep for our screens, and that's a trade-off you're making if you scroll on your phone before bed. And it's a more costly trade-off than you might think. A new study shows that just 1 extra hour on your phone at night can spike your risk of insomnia by nearly 60%. I'm joined by Dr. Parveen Bhatti, a cancer epidemiologist at the British Columbia Cancer Research Institute, to discuss. Parveen, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, real pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about this study of 45,000 young people. It looked at the link between screen time at night and insomnia. I feel like anecdotally it's something we all say, but this study illuminates kind of the science behind it and what the risk is. Do you want to walk me through it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really interesting study because of its large size. 45,000 people. That's quite significant. And like you said, we already know, quite a bit about the negative impacts of using screens on sleep. But the question that they were really trying to get at was if the type of screen use really mattered. And so they really wanted to get it this question around social media. And they used the term arousal in this paper, where it's like that social media use is more arousing, more engaging than other types of more passive screen use. And maybe that might be more disruptive. And that's sort of been the general thinking around this. But what they found was that the type of screen use didn't really matter, that across all these different types of screen activities, that they all sort of equally were bad for your sleep.
Don't come for my TV in my bedroom set to low light on warm tone mode. I feel like there's two things here. There's the engagement, the arousal. There's also the blue light. I've spoken to people who study that kind of stuff about your circadian rhythms. It's a whole host of things that I think add up to bad sleep, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they were talking about how there's 3 or 4 aspects of this that can negatively impact sleep. Based on what they found, so one was that the type of activity, that sort of arousal mechanism, was important. And they basically found that didn't matter. But the other ones are, and the one that they're very supportive of in this paper, is that it's just displacing your sleep. So if you go to bed and then you grab your phone, instead of sleeping, you're on the phone. So you're just delaying your sleep onset. Very basic mechanism. They tend to discount in this paper the role of blue light, which is not something that they actually study. It's sort of based on a previous report that they cite. I think that's a little bit of a sort of an overstep there. I think there is a lot of evidence that blue light from screens, but even any light, is going to have this sort of negative impact on melatonin in your body, which is a sleep hormone. So I think there's still a question about the importance of that, so that you can't completely discount that, but still really interesting findings from this study.
Well, it seems like a seemingly harmless habit. I think a lot of us do it, that doom scrolling before bed, the watching the Netflix on the phone, the just tucked in with your side of your head on your pillow, staring at your screen. I find sleep regulation is the single biggest thing for me with mood stabilization. I have major depression. When I don't sleep well, it's totally exacerbated. The world's a horrible place. And when my sleep's good, everything kind of flows from that. I secretly had you on the show mostly to preach my technique, which is I plug my phone in out of reach. I plug it in on the other side of the bedroom on a little, a little chair, maybe 10 feet from my bed, and I can't actually physically reach it. And just it not being there, even if I'm not on it, just the fact that I can't reach for it, I think helps me. And it's something that like I preach and I swear by, and my friends who have switched to doing it love it. I know there's no science behind my technique, but how bad is having a phone there really? Like on average, how long will it keep me up if I'm on it?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be dependent on the individual person. But what you're actually doing, it's something that I started doing a little while ago as well, because I was finding that I was doing the same sort of thing. As much as I know about the negative impacts of this stuff, you still get sucked into sort of deeply incorporating this into your everyday life, and then you just use it at bed. Like if I'm not falling asleep instantaneously, somehow I'm wasting time, and you need to pick up the phone. So I found the same thing. Keeping it out of reach is really important. You need to give yourself sort of time to calm down and just fall into sleep. And so we hear a lot about things like sleep hygiene, which is having this routine at bedtime to make sure that you get a restful night of sleep. And I'll say the same thing too, is that like you were talking about impacts on your depression symptoms. I'll notice too, if I do not sleep well, you sort of feel like you get more easily agitated the next day. Like things will set you off that regularly probably wouldn't. And so I think we all need to recognize more what the true value of sleep to maintaining health and well-being.
If I don't get my 8 hours, I wake up in the morning and I'm out for blood. Like, get out of my way.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's one of these people who says they need a screen to fall asleep. Now, she doesn't go on her phone. We have a TV in the bedroom. Our compromise is like the most boring 90s sitcoms to fall asleep to. The TV set to the lowest possible brightness with those warm orange tones and no blue light. I actually don't think that's great for my sleep, but I can handle it as long as it's not a phone. What do you say to people who really claim they need that screen? She's a little bit younger than me. She's an early millennial. I'm an elder millennial. So she grew up with a phone. She grew up at a young age with a phone putting her to bed. She says she needs it. It's hard to argue with her. She says she can't sleep without it.
Yeah.
What do you say to people like that?
Yeah, that's a good, I haven't thought about that before. I haven't heard that argument before. Maybe I don't know enough young people at this point in my life, but the thing is, it clearly is a sort of a habit, right? You get used to it, and I would venture to say that you should still be maybe a little bit suspect around the quality of sleep that you're actually getting. So yeah, you sort of need it because it's a habit, but maybe your quality of sleep isn't great because you've got this screen on blasting light at you, and that it's worth maybe seeing if there's some other habit that you could fall into to go to sleep. I mean, the old school, having a book to read before bedtime in a very dim sort of lit setting is something that has worked for a lot of people. But I think it's worth exploring whether there's alternatives to having the screen on so you can fall asleep.
People often treat sleep as this like sort of soft luxury that you don't need. Yeah. You hear the line, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." My grandfather always used to say that. How important is sleep to our health? Like, are there wide-reaching implications of chronic insomnia?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I mean, it's so critical, and you're right. We live in a society where it's really easy to sacrifice sleep in the name of like productivity or engaging in other activities that you think are more important, and also this sort of idea that you can recoup sleep afterwards. So like you're sort of burn the candle at both ends during the week and then try to make up for it on the weekend. That stuff just doesn't work. It's going to have a negative impact over time. And so, we see, in terms of positive health sort of lifestyle behaviors, eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep. And that's going to be a little different for different people, depending on your age. Typically, it's, at least 7 hours. And we just see that it makes a lot of difference in terms of your just, day-to-day feeling of well-being. But we're seeing that chronic disruption to sleep, there's evidence that it's linked to increased risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, even neurodegenerative diseases. So there's a lot of implications around not getting enough sleep and not getting that sort of high quality sleep that we need.
At the risk of getting on my soapbox and preaching the exact same thing I did 5 minutes ago, what's one small thing people can do to improve their sleep? In my opinion, it's power down the phone like 30 minutes before bed, plug it away from bed. Is there other tips or recommendations?
I really think having that routine, so trying to go to sleep at a regular time each day. Now, look, we all have stressors in our lives, young children, all these things, and there's compromises that you have to make. But as much as possible to get into that sort of a routine, to make sure that your bedroom at sleep time is just for sleeping. And so having the TV in there, is not ideal, because what it does is it sort of becomes a habit for you. Your body becomes sort of used to the idea that when I come in here at this time, it's time for me to go to sleep, and it sort of helps you with sleep onset. So I think just getting into those positive habits is really an important part of this.
My old psychiatrist, she said to me, the bed is for sleeping, and then and that's it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's good advice. Dr. Parveen Bhatti is a cancer epidemiologist at the British Columbia Cancer Research Institute. Parveen, thanks for joining me. I appreciate the chat.
Yeah, this was great.
Coming up after the break, we'll speculate what will happen if WW3 goes down. Nuclear war. Where on the planet would be safe? The best places to go if the worst thing happens in a few moments. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
We solve world problems with radio jingles and bad advice. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
If World War III breaks out, most of us might be toast in under an hour. All-out nuclear war. It's fun to think about, maybe not so fun to experience. But there are a few places on the globe where people might survive. And today we're going to talk to someone who knows exactly where those are and why. He's an atmospheric and oceanic sciences professor at the University of Colorado. His name is Owen Toon. Brian, welcome in.
Thank you, David.
It's one of those weird topics where it's like kind of fun to discuss what might happen in nuclear war and how the Earth might shift, but it will be one of the most horrific things to ever happen on this planet. I'm in New York City. How close are we, most of us in North America, sort of technologically, politically, to the kind of global nuclear conflict that might happen in World War III?
Well, we seem to be in a very perilous moment here with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and lots of threats from the Russians to bombard the United States and Canada and Europe with nuclear weapons if we don't stop helping Ukraine fight them. So we're in a particularly dangerous time.
But isn't this concept of mutually assured destruction, I feel like that was something that came up a lot with politicians before my time. Wouldn't that prevent Russia from ever using its nuclear arsenal, knowing that any exchange would be a lose-lose situation?
Well, you might think that would be true, but the most likely scenario for a nuclear conflict is some sort of accident or misinterpretation of what's going on. There have been multiple cases where either the United States or Russia has thought that the other side has launched their nuclear missiles. And the president of the United States, for example, has like 5 minutes to decide if he's going to launch our missiles in return. And so there's just a huge possibility there to think that missiles have been launched when they haven't been launched. And in the past, that's been the case. They had new detection systems for launches that didn't work right. I saw a cloud and thought it was a missile launch. There were missile launches in Europe of weather high altitude kind of missiles that are just measuring things about the atmosphere. The Russians thought that might be a beginning of an attack. Then there was a whole thing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is probably most similar to the current situation, where there are all kinds of Russian ships near Cuba, and submarines there had nuclear missiles on them, torpedoes. And we were, for the fun, throwing hand grenades over the side to try to force them to the surface, thinking that they would know what we were doing. And they took this as nuclear depth charges being dropped on them and came very close to launching nuclear weapons. Plus, there were a large number of limited range or tactical nuclear weapons on Cuba that we didn't even know about. So if we had invaded Cuba to try to solve this problem, probably would have been a bloodbath and could have provoked a global war.
I know I asked the question, but honestly, you're not helping me sleep better tonight, I gotta say. I'm reminded, and I know it's a bit of a trail off, of Stanislav Petrov, the largely unknown hero of the 20th century, who basically misread, like you said, signals at a Missile Command Defense Center in the Soviet Union and said, it's not the Americans nuking us. But had he have reported what the radar said, nuclear arms might have been exchanged and we would likely not be sitting here today. Now let's talk about what it would look like if we weren't sitting here today. How much of the world's population would be wiped out in the first, I don't know, hour plus of World War III?
Well, the United States and Russia together have 4,000 deployed nuclear weapons, have another 4,000 in storage. But these deployed nuclear weapons are sitting in missile silos near airplanes ready to be deployed or on submarines. There's only 300 cities in the United States with more than 100,000 people. There's only 200 cities in Russia with more than 100,000 people. That's 500 cities, 4,000 weapons. They could attack every city with 100,000 people with 8 nuclear weapons. Hiroshima was bigger than 100,000 people, and it was basically destroyed with one tiny nuclear weapon. And the current nuclear weapons are 15 times or even more powerful.
They wouldn't target downtown Manhattan, would they? I'm just asking for a friend.
Well, it's hard to know. There's debates about whether that would be considered to be a target or not. The United States pays a lot of attention to the laws of war, and I'm not sure if there's any military facilities in downtown Manhattan. I don't think so. But they might attack Columbia University, for example.
That's close enough to... Anyway,
close enough.
So you're saying there's way too many weapons for not that many large-ish cities. All of those would likely be wiped out in the first hour?
No, probably they would attack military installations and industries that support the military. And, if you go to various cities like San Diego, for example, it's just military everywhere and mostly Navy bases. St. Petersburg in Russia is got a lot of military targets in it. Moscow has lots of military targets. Any large commercial airport, NOAA facilities where weather prediction is done, anybody that's launching satellites, those things probably all targets. In any military base that's near you is probably a target. So that might kill, we think, 300 million people or something like that, depending on just what the targets were.
Wow.
From just the explosions themselves. But that's not the real danger. The real danger is that these explosions will set fires in these areas. That's what happened with Hiroshima. There was 100 times more energy released in fires, big firestorm, than in the nuclear weapon explosion. And what happens with those fires is they burn all the debris in cities where there's all kinds of things to burn. And that will produce a huge thunderstorm above the city, probably, depending on the winds, which will carry that smoke from those fires aloft into the upper atmosphere. And once you get above commercial aircraft altitudes or in the stratosphere, it never rains. So you put that stuff into the stratosphere and it'll stay there for years. It's black. If you've ever seen a fireplace, there's black stuff all over the sides of it. So the smoke is full of black material that will absorb sunlight. And the amount of material that can be ejected that way is enough to absorb more than half of all the sunlight, U.S.-Russia NATO war, that would normally fall on the surface. So this becomes just like day and night or winter and summer. If you reduce the amount of sunlight, temperatures drop, and they start dropping very rapidly. So this would cause what we call a nuclear winter, where temperatures would quickly fall. It would only take a few weeks for the stuff to spread over the northern hemisphere and a month or so to go over the whole Earth. The black sunlight globally, and temperatures would drop, and you wouldn't have it at mid-latitude, for example, any days above freezing, the minimum temperature above freezing for a couple of years. You're not going to grow anything in that situation. So we've looked at the consequences of this for every country in the world, a recent paper in Nature Food, and we found that certain countries, Canada, for example, even a war between India and Pakistan would probably kill 95% of the people in Canada from starvation. High latitude countries are particularly susceptible to this because they already have short growing seasons and, early frosts and late frosts and snows.
Where would be safe? Where would be beachfront property? Where would be the best place to be in a scenario like this?
So nowhere in the Northern Hemisphere is safe. In the U.S.-Russia NATO war, we think 95% of everybody would starve to death in the U.S., Russia, China, Middle East, Far East. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's not quite so bad because there's mostly ocean there, and so it moderates the temperature drop, and it's not so heavily populated. So places like New Zealand and Australia, Argentina, countries like that are already producing enough food that they could and they're exporting a lot of food. They would just stop exporting food and they'd eat it themselves. For example, New Zealand raises a lot of sheep. The sheep eat the grass, which is pretty hardy stuff. So the people in New Zealand would probably just eat the sheep. Of course, New Zealand depends a lot of imports, and they'd lose their imports. But pretty soon their electrical systems would fail from lack of parts for generators. And they wouldn't have fuel to farm anything or drive cars. So it probably wouldn't be nice down there. Plus, a lot of people would be fleeing to New Zealand and Australia and Argentina. So probably there would be a lot of conflict over all those immigrants.
Sounds like a horrible situation, but I guess if you like mutton, at least things will be okay in New Zealand for a little while. Thanks for going over this with me. I appreciate the chat, Brian. It was interesting.
You're welcome, David.
Brian Toon is an atmospheric and oceanic sciences professor at the University of Colorado. That was the last show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm David Cooper. Goodbye.